out on there is live. And it's live. And so it's been a while since I did a live stream, and I'm trying to return back to consistently deliver, you know, chunks of bits to this Nikeza project on my GitHub. You can go to Nikeza on my GitHub account, and you can see the progress or lack of over there. But my goal is to establish myself as the technical authority in South Florida. Nah, forget that. All of Florida. Nah, forget that. Southeast of the continental USA. Establish myself as the technical authority on F sharp and Xamarin, the combination of the two. And so that's what I'm focused on. Regardless of reality, that's what I'm going to strive for. This video, I'm going to just entertain some thoughts about building a user portal and appending that to this, in the case, the mobile project that I'm working on. And that's it. So, like, if I share my screen, come here, screen. I'm gonna share you. Yeah. All right. So, screen is shared, and I guess I can kill you, my friend. So, all right, what are we talking about? Well, I have here's one that carries a mobile solution, and this is what I've been trying to preach. I think for like 3 years now. This whole like screaming architecture thingy that I'm attempting to practice is you open up a solution, and well, you see what the architecture of that solution is: access, portfolio, profile, subscriptions. Okay, that's what this mobile application is about. Well, when I say access, it's about specifically, well, if we go into the commands, we see registration and we see session. Okay. Actually, we'll see second over. All right, that makes me feel better. If we look at the events, maybe that'll be easier. Actually, no, forget that. If we go to design, we see that for this access library under design, we see the type of language that we use: email, password, entity name, first name, last name. Okay. This notion of a form that pretty much comprises all that: unvalidated form, validated form. And then over here, we see the functions, right? Submit function, login function, logout function. So what I'm experimenting with is, for every library, you can go to the design file of that library, and it's going to share the language that's going to be used for that particular library, aka domain. And in addition, it's going to expose the design or the operational design that's going to be used in that library. So the operations are submit, login, log out. That is what we do in access, right? The access domain. We submit a validated form, we log in with credentials, we log out, passing in a provider. Okay. So I didn't really make too much progress on the other libraries. With profile, I didn't add a design file in there, but it's going to pretty much, when I do, it's going to provide the same type of language, and high-level operation design. So, all right, with that said, what else do I want to share? Yeah, so these are the major domains. Okay. Yeah. And well, in regards to the UI and the database and all the other stuff, those are details. And I just bundle that inside of an integration folder. Okay. Because those are details of the application. And those are like really just integration details. And so we have this app logic, we have the UI, and we have UI logic. Okay. And then we have like this whole Xamarin.Forms, Xamarin Android that Xamarin.Forms relies on. Okay. Now, this UI right now is basically a library that just contains the various pages that the application will render. So we see in the access folder, we have login page, registration, page 2, page 3, whatever. We also have an arbitrary error page. And this portal page is what I'm currently working on right now. Okay. So that's in the UI library. We also have UI logic. The UI logic pretty much provides the plumbing and the mediators that's necessary for UI rendering. So specifically, we have, oh, hold up, Hell's Bells. This looks familiar. Access, profile, subscriptions, portfolio. Well, this is reminiscent of the actual domains that we have, access. If I go in order, access, profile, portfolio, subscriptions, right? So these domains that I have that scream the intent of this application or this system is also exposed, right? That same vocabulary is also provided with my UI logic as these folders that contain the view models, amongst other things that the view models may rely on. So this access folder has the registration view model, the login view model, okay? And then there's a little adapter that's needed that does something that I don't know, I forgot about, but it's necessary. Profile is what I'm getting ready to get started on. Specifically with profile, because I said that I'm going to add a portal page, then I'm going to add a portal view model in this directory. Okay. And we have subscriptions, which we have recent, which is kind of like the news feed. We have members and we have subscriptions over here, right? So in the portfolio, that's going, yeah, I have my portfolio view model. Okay. So that's the UI logic. I went over the UI library, and the app logic is pretty much, well, the logic for the overall application. This is going to handle the navigation from one page to another, as well as any other side effects. So, for example, this, or should I say, maybe cross-cutting concerns. Right now, the only thing that's on the radar is navigation. But if there were some other requirements for this application, like if this were a healthcare application, there were like some HIPAA compliance requirements, such as wiping data and a whole bunch of other things that I don't know about, then that would also be done within this app logic library. Okay. And so we see that there's also a design file for this app logic library. And we see that we have some modules one of which is access, another module is profile editor. If we examine access, we see that we have access.login, and we see that we have access.registration. Okay. And if you notice that for any of these, I would say, subdomains, login, registration, when these are actually like operations, right? Maybe operations is a better term than subdomains. For any of these operations, login, registration, we have this notion called side effects, right? The side effects is actually going to be a function that takes in currently an application as the first argument, side effects as another argument, and it's going to return side effects. So what we're really going to do is we're going to basically manage the side effects that our business logic is going to ultimately yield. When I say yield, I mean basically the way that the architecture of this application is set up or engineered is that for any view model, in which a view model is essentially a mediator between your presentation and your actual domain, what's going to happen is this view model will basically receive a request from the presentation, hence a page. And that view model, which serves as a mediator, is going to dispatch that request to the domain logic, right? By means of a command. That command will ultimately enter a workflow for a given domain, whether it is access, portfolio, profile, or subscriptions. And the result of that command being inputted into a specific workflow, such as here's a workflows.fs file right here, right? The result of a command entering a workflow, the result of it is going to be some events, right? So for this submit registration module, we have a workflow that this module contains. So when a command enters this submit registration workflow, what it's going to do is it's going to basically have data attached to it, in which this data is actually a validated form. And it's going to go ahead and submit that form by some submit function, right? The submit function can be internal, meaning that it's, how do I say this? It doesn't do any I/O, or it could do I/O. Of course, in production, this is going to actually hit a database, right? We're submitting data. That data is going across the wire, hitting a web server, ultimately trickling down to a database, okay? And so at the end of like this operation, the result of submit.executed, whether it's true or false, whether it was successful or not, right? What's going to happen is we're going to generate a list of events, a list of one or more events. Those events ultimately are going to come back to, where's a good example? Like those events are going to be returned to whatever view model is executing or dispatching that command into a workflow, and that list of events eventually get broadcasted, okay? Well, you say broadcasted, what you mean, Willis? Well, it gets broadcasted within the view model, and what happens is our app logic will provide a list of handlers that could potentially handle that list of events that occurred, such as a profile being saved or some type of error that occurred, any type of event. This app logic provides a number of handlers, such as handle navigation, handle registration, handle login, handle profile editor, handle portfolio, handle subscriptions. And so when you look at these files, what it's really saying is handle navigation events, handle registration events, handle login events, handle profile editor events, handle portfolio events, handle subscription events. Yes. If we look at the very first one, which is going to be more likely when someone registers, then we see that we what's this right here? I didn't implement this one fully yet. I think login is probably a better example. If we look at handle login, then we'll see that we have a module called login events, and we also have a module called login. Okay, this module called login basically has I would say provides a value called dependencies. These dependencies are going to be used to actually be injected into our login view model. All right. Right now that we're in the app logic, but in our UI logic, we have our list of view models. Okay. Hence this right here. And you will see that this dependencies right here is essentially what this references over here. Okay. And so these dependencies, they can have a number of properties, but they will almost always have a property for side effects, in which is going to be essentially side effects is going to be a list of functions that our app logic is going to provide when our view model broadcasts the various events that are emitted by our domain after a workflow executes. Okay. So right now, like for example, the side effects for login attempt is initialized to be empty, but then we are going to add to our side effects for a login attempt a navigation side effect, right? So this append navigation is up here, and we see the signature of this append navigation is that it's going to output side effects just like it accepts side effects in addition to the actual application. Okay. And what it's going to do is it's going to basically handle what event or what list, in this case, it's going to handle um, a kind of event that was broadcasted to it from the view model. Of course, this has no clue what the view model is, but the view model ultimately performed the broadcast. If you look over here, come here. The view model did a broadcast, and we actually have our side effects used as our dependencies over here, right? So if you look up here in the constructor of the view model, it actually has dependencies injected, and one of the properties of the dependencies is side effects, right? Another one is implementation. Implementation is pretty much like strategy pattern, where as long as the function signature, I'll talk about that later, but let's just focus on side effects right now. All right. What's going to happen is for append navigation function for the module login events, it's going to receive the application. It's going to receive the current list of side effects. Okay. And what's going to happen is it provides a function called handle that will receive an event type, a login event type, which is either logged in or login failed. Okay. Regardless of the login event type, which we see is defined right here, login event, right? Regardless of the event type, Because this is an impure function, it's going to ultimately output a unit, right? So meaning that it's not going to return any useful type for further processing. It kind of returns a void. In functional programming, we call it a unit. And so we do pattern matching on the event that was passed in here for this handle function. And if it's logged in, then we take our application instance and we feed that into our navigate function. In addition to that app instance that we feed into our navigate function, we're also feeding an instance of a page, specifically a portal page instance. And that's how our navigation is going to be done. If we actually examine this navigate function, then we see that this navigate function takes a content page, it takes a context, which essentially is kind of like a payload or data attached to that page or associated to that page, and the actual application instance that we're using. And I basically create a value called expression, and this expression is what I'm going to use to log information. Right now, I just have arbitrary system.diagnostics.debug that's going to be doing the logging. But I mean, ultimately, later on, I'm going to create a interface and then create some arbitrary type that implements that interface. And that's going to be used instead. And I'll pass that or inject that into this navigate, or pass that into a navigate function. But ultimately, we see over here that our application instance has this notion or property called main page, and we mutate the main page with the value that we passed in, which is of type content page, which is reminiscent of what we just discussed over here. Hence, instantiating a portal page if we successfully logged in, or instantiating an error page if the login failed. Okay. Yeah. All right. So that's kind of the high level architecture. And so like where I'm at right now, well, you probably want to see a demo. Yeah, you probably want to see a demo. I don't know if my demo works, but come here. Where's my it's over here, right? Over here? Yes. Come here. So theoretically I should be able to and then over here, I should be able to control KU, uncomment, and I should be able to run you. Come here. Yes. Okay. And not that one. Come here, Willis. And come here. Over here. I'm not sure how long it's going to take for my emulator to bootstrap. That was ESA. I'm checking my messages on my phone right now. Oh, I knew that sounded familiar. All right. So while that's bootstrapping, I'm checking my email. All right, so we're launching a page. This should be the login page because it says login page, which we're assigning to the main page of this app. I don't know what this exception is. When I just hit F5, it just keeps going. And so here we go over here, right? And I mean, there's nothing. There's no real validation on this login page, but I could say Scott at abc.com, and I can say like test or something. Okay. And so when I hit next, which by the way was disabled before we entered in characters, it's going to render what is supposed to be a portal page. But right now, this stuff has no dependency on the actual view model. In fact, I don't even have a portal view model constructed yet. So all this is just straight from XAML with no binding context. Okay. So la. What do I mean by that? Well, this is what I mean. There's a portal.xaml, something like that. Portal page.xaml. And this is the page right here. Should probably throw that under a portal folder. But this is the page right here that is rendered over here. Okay. And I got my resources set up that has some styles in it. And uh, right now, like there's no binding context, right? Um, More likely, there won't be a binding context that's defined in the actual XAML. The binding context more than likely will actually be. That's a good question. Where would that be? Binding context. Is it smart enough to find it here? Oh. Ah, shoot. Hold up. Stop it. Okay. Um, no, that's not what I wanted. Okay. Well, for the app.xaml.cs, we do for the initial page the binding context, but I believe that when we do the navigation, I wish there was a shortcut for collapsing this. When we do the navigation, um, more than likely, I'll be putting the binding context in here. Well, yeah, because that makes sense. More likely, I would probably do something like if I expand this, wherever you declare the actual page at, the instantiation of the page, um, you probably want to do the binding context too. So, like right now, what I'm saying is more than likely, we'll probably do something like this where we say, there's a, how would I say this? A number of ways of doing it. Right now, I'm trying to do the shortcut way, but I would say let dependency. That's not what I want. Let view model equal, and there's supposed to be in UI logic a view model factory over here, and so let's just imagine that. Let's imagine that I had another module called um, profile, maybe. But I'm going to say, I'm going to call this portal. Okay. And this portal is going to be under profile, something like that. Okay. Which means that we'll indent this over here, something like that. Okay. And this, I'm not going to go too deep into this, but what I would do is I would import I would import this factory, and that factory will have a profile.portal.getViewModel, I guess I could add that in here too. Uh-oh. Maybe I have to build it first before it shows up in my before it shows up as a reference, or before it shows up so that it can be referenced. And then theoretically I should be able to do something like profile dot portal, and then over here I should be able to say, actually I'll just say this right here. Over here I should be able to say portal dot get view model, something like that. And then over here I should be able to say something to the effect of, should be like binding context. Binding context. Why isn't binding context showing up in here? Binding, oh, should be like something like this. Okay. But that would probably be something like this, maybe. Doesn't know what binding context is. So then we have to break this down even more and say let page equals something like that. New page. Oh, because I'm in F sharp. I'm not in C sharp. So that's why I can't use this initializer. And so then I should be able to say page dot, it should be like page dot binding context. That's what it should let me do. Page dot binding context, and it should let me mutate it to something like this. Something like that. And then theoretically, it should just be able to say something like that. Okay. And so what just happened? We have our view model here. Well, we don't need that anymore because we could just call this over here, something like that. And we lift this up here, something like that. And I think this is okay. Let me do something like that. Okay. And that doesn't look ideal to me, but that is pretty much, the compiler should be happy. I would actually, I don't know, I could do some cosmetic things over here. I kind of want to bring this down to at least 2 lines. I mean, to at minimal 2 lines instead of like 3. I'm talking about this whole thing. Right now, this is 3. I want to bring it down to 2. One thing that we can probably do is we can probably create an arbitrary function for just constructing a page in which we pass in the type of page, and we pass in the view model that we want to assign to that page, and then we maybe pipe that into our navigate. So what I mean is we can probably, hold up, can't do it at that point. probably do something like let, I don't know, create page, and create page is going to take create page is going to take call it configure page, and it's probably going to take a page instance like that, and it's probably going to take a view model like that, and this is where this is probably where we would do page.binding context over here, which means that page would have to be of type page. I'm not sure if it has to be of content page, but it definitely would have to be of page. And then we say the page.binding context equals view model, something like that. Now it says page is not defined. Xamarin.Forms, page, something like that. Okay. So theoretically, we may be able to do something like, let me drop this down some. Theoretically, we may be able to do something like this where we say configure page, in which we say we could do like new portal page like this, which probably have to cover like that. And then we say portal.getViewModel, like over here. Okay. And that would do it. But over here, it's not going to know what page is over here. So this configure page is actually going to return a page like that. So then you have to say let page equal like that. Now we could either do page like that, or theoretically, I think we could also do a semicolon like this. And so we just reduce the line like that. Okay. Now this navigate is expecting what is this complaining about? It says it's expecting a content page, but it's receiving a page. Well, that could probably be fixed over here. So, I mean, I don't know. It's, well, okay, yeah. If we configure a page, come here. Up here, we know it's going to be a content page, but in the actual navigate, it probably should just be basic, like this over here, okay? And so if we're still able to build this, then hopefully it should be green, okay? You should be green, my friend. And if that does become green, then I can finesse my way into being more idiomatic with the whole functional programming thing with the pipe operator, meaning that I can, if I really want to over-engineer, I could probably do something like, you know, I don't know. I kind of like this way right here. Page, because app pipe into navigate, and then you provide the page and the provider. If I change that navigate, if I change the parameters of navigate, I don't think it would read well. Yeah, yeah, I'm gonna stick with this. Okay. And that's pretty much it. The error page is going to follow something very similar. I'm going to leave the error page alone for right now. But yeah, all my tests should still pass. Believe it or not, I do have a test that actually touches on this append navigation. It doesn't know about append navigation, but it it basically tests the execution of submitting a registration form. And when you submit a registration form, as I discussed earlier, a side effect is navigation that takes place. And so this code actually gets executed. And well, you probably want to see that. So, okay. I have it should be like a registration somewhere over here. Over here. And that's not it. Oh, it's login. Login. Yeah. Okay. And so over here, Control RT, shortcut for run test. This test can log in if provided email and password. Okay. If I go in here, login.next is a command. I call the execute of that command. And we hit the workflow, get the dependencies. We successfully mock a login. We get the result of that login, which was successful via the OK case of the result union. We return as a list of events logged in with the information as a context. All right. And then we then broadcast a list of events that, well, in this case, happens to have logged in as the event. And so we have some observers in here that we're going to iterate through. I'm thinking I should rename this observers to handlers. This is in my common folder, so I'm going to rename that later after I run this. So you see we're over here now to this append navigation. And we are configuring a page, which we should. Over here, we're going to get an exception because code smell or not, this test has a dependency on Xamarin.Forms. And so we don't actually have a running application. And so we get an exception saying that the type initializer for Xamarin.Forms URI image source through an exception. And so I kind of account for that. But in this test, I don't really care about navigating to a page. I just want to see if I can log in. And I can log in theoretically if my view model is validated. That's the type of logic that I'm using right now. That might change. But basically it's if the login is, if that view model is validated, maybe validated is the wrong term. Well, no. This validated is only doing validation. So I'm not really doing authenticated, which is probably what I want to do in hindsight now that I'm combing through this code. I probably wanted to have another property called is authenticated and test for that instead. But anyway, this is the try with is pretty much the try catch in C sharp, right? Except with the with, you have an opportunity to examine the type of exception, and is validated is set to true. Okay, and all that stuff should pass. Okay, and we see that we have green stuff over here. All right, so now my OCD is taking over. So I want to call these handlers, or I want to call these observers handlers, like this. Come here. And in addition to that, I'm not sure how expensive it is for me to do right now, but this is validated. Doesn't really mean that, doesn't really correlate with this can log in, right? Because this validated just means that the fields were okay to submit. It doesn't mean that those fields were, or the values of those fields were authenticated for logging in, right? So this should really be, yeah. This is the logic up here. And this this broadcast, which we do up here, I don't feel like doing it. In a way, like my view model, okay, so philosophy. My view model shouldn't care currently if, well, should it care? I was going to say that my view model shouldn't care if it was authenticated or not. It should just take those events and broadcast it. Okay. But if it gets broadcasted, yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, ideally, as a user, I would want to see that the page that I'm on, if I put in the wrong credentials or invalid credentials, then I say, hey, unable to log in right there on that page. I don't think I want to be taken to a different page. But theoretically, this could just spin up if I go over here to the handlers. This is logged in. Login failed really doesn't have to be a, it really doesn't have to be an error page that it navigates to. Login fail can be failed to authenticate, and that would be a different case. So, like, what I'm saying is, there's different reasons for failure. The question is, do we provide those reasons in the login as a login event, such as fail to communicate or fail to connect to server? Like, do we handle that? I I think so, because the user wants to know if their authentication failed versus if something behind the scenes, such as unable to connect to the server, failed. Now, if I do that, that's going to be expensive, right? I think so, because now we're doing like something like login failed to authenticate, something like that. Do we really have to say login? Failed to authenticate. And this login over here can be it could be really this can be failed to connect. Hold up. That's all right. failed to connect. This failed to connect a valid event or a valid reason for not being able to log in. I think so. And this is like in the domain logic, hence this in the case of mobile access. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to expose all these details to the user, but yeah, this is interesting. So login, failed to authenticate, failed to connect. Something like that right here. So when I build, I should get some errors. One is I definitely know over here that we want to, within this handle login, we want to do this failed to connect should result in a new error page. All right. But the failed to authenticate, one is if we failed to authenticate, that probably shouldn't be in navigation. But we probably don't want to do wildcard either. So this one is failed to authenticate, and credentials maybe. And we don't do anything there. Well, we probably want to log it, but that's not really the job of, yeah, that's not really the job of navigation. We would have another handler that would subscribe to the side effects for logging in, and that one would just log it, because in navigation, like, it just doesn't make sense to do anything here. Okay, which means that if we go back to our view model, we not quite sure how to handle that, because I kind of like this whole composability, whatever term you want to call it. I kind of like that. I don't want to break this up and say, oh, by the way, if we failed to authenticate, then like, I don't know. I don't want to break this up yet. Over here, we have error, and where is this at? This is Nikeza mobile.access session result of login. If it's okay, provider credentials. Not sure about what to do about this one. If it's an error, then if it's an error, then that error is failed to connect. An error is not failed to authenticate, or maybe that's an exception. If it's okay, then it can either be logged in or failed to authenticate. which means that our result of login can either be, is really a provider option, because either you can have a provider or you don't, something like that. So that's going to throw a monkey wrench in everything. Okay. If I return back over here, then we're now going to say info function, okay, and it's going to be sum, in which we have a provider. And if we have a provider, then we return this over here. Something like that. Okay. Else, if we don't have a provider, then we can pretty much say failed to authenticate. Oh, Scott, you're so smart. And we can pass info over here. Fail to authenticate takes credentials. And result. Okay. Over here. Oh, no, that doesn't work either. I thought this was credentials. Oh, no, it's not. Well, I don't really need to give them that information. Maybe I do. How do I pull credentials from here? Logged in, provider, result. Boom, 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 boom. Provider option. I don't know how to pull it from here. And honestly, I'm not too worried about it. This is good for logging, but I'm not concerned about this right now. Which means that I want to in order so it looks better. I could put you like this. Oh, why did you do that? It says mismatch. Login failed. A result of login. This is where my option needs to get done. And I'll figure this part out later. All right, I'm starting to tap out now. But anyway, that's I didn't even begin to start constructing the actual portal page. But all this was an example of, where did all this start at? This all started in this right here, this append navigation, and realizing that, hey, you can still, how's this work? You can fail to authenticate based on login credentials, but that doesn't mean that it's an error as an event. It's a successful event. Oh, by the way, you weren't able to authenticate, but there was no exception thrown. Like, we still have a connection. So that's what I was attempting to do. And I'm going to take a little rest break, and sooner or later I'll return to this and resolve this based on it having something to do with the option type of a provider based on this, right? I don't even know where I'm at anymore. All right, that's it. I'm out. I'm tapping out. Peace. How do I stop this? Stop and broadcast.